Hi, I'm Micah Luston, and I'm in Mr. Peckham's AP Macroeconomics class, period 4B. And so today I'm going to talk to you guys about the Phillips curve. So the Phillips curve was made to show the relationship, or to show the short-run trade-off between unemployment and inflation. And this relationship is inverse, because whenever unemployment increases, inflation tends to decrease, and vice versa. When inflation increases, unemployment tends to decrease. Now, for this graph, the y-axis is the inflation rates, and the x-axis is the unemployment rate. Okay, so now there are two lines in this graph. There's the LRPC, the long run Phillips curve, and the SRPC, which is a short run Phillips curve. Now, for the long run Phillips curve, it shows the natural rate of unemployment. And that rate is usually around 4 to 5%. Now, the natural rate of unemployment is when the cyclical unemployment is equal to 0. Now, the cyclical unemployment only occurs during a recessionary period, and it is when unemployment is higher than that 5% mark-off of the natural rate. So whenever unemployment exceeds that percentage, then cyclical unemployment occurs. And that is because when people don't have jobs, they don't have money to spend, and cyclical unemployment is when there's not enough money being spent, or occurs when not enough money is being spent. So that's bad when that's above 0. So you want it always at 0. Okay. So the LRPC is just the line that indicates where the natural rate of unemployment, or the full employment level for that economy is. Now, the SRPC is what shows the relationship between unemployment and inflation. I'm just going to graph the Phillips curve. I'm just going to draw the Phillips curve graph, but minus the LRPC line, because I'm just talking about the SRPC for right now. So the SRPC shows this relationship by, I'm just taking two random dots to show the opposite ends of the spectrum, by showing the inverse between them. So when so for this dot, when inflation is very high, unemployment is very low, and the opposite is when unemployment is very high, inflation is very low. So when you plot those 2 points and trace the line through them, that's what creates the SRPC line. It's just supposed to show the relationship between these two things. Okay, so now on this graph, when these two lines, the cross-section between these two lines, SRPC and LRPC, that's where you want your economy to be. The dot shows where the economy is that you're discussing. So that shows where the economy stands on this graph. So if the dot is there, that means your economy is in equilibrium. And equilibrium is really good. That's where you always want to get with your economy. That's where you always want to change what's happening to get to that point. Now, if you go past that with an increase of an unemployment rate, that means that your economy is in a recession because you have a low inflation rate but a high unemployment rate, as shown over here. And then over here on this side of the graph, if your economy is plotted over here, that means that your economy is in an inflationary period because you have high inflation rate, hence inflationary period, and low unemployment. So, knowing that, I'm going to show you how the Phillips curve is directly correlated to the ADAS graph. So here's the Phillips curve, inflation rate, unemployment rate, and over here is the ADAS. So here's price level, and here's the real GDP output. Now, I'm not going to draw the insides yet, I'll get to that later, but I just wanted to tell you that with the X and Y axes, they're directly correlated. So the inflation and price level are the same basically. So when inflation is, when the inflation rate is increasing, price level on the ADAS graph increases as well. But inversely, the real GDP output, when that increases, the unemployment rate actually decreases. So when that happens, or not, it's also vice versa, when these two, when inflation decreases, price level decreases, and vice versa, when unemployment increases, the real GDP output increases, or when unemployment rate increases, real GDP output would decrease. So for the graphs, I'm going to show you, well, first let me say that for these graphs, the LRAS and the LRPC is exactly the same. They both are the vertical lines that are located at full employment. Let me scooch this back some. That are located at full employment. Here's the SRPC line, short-run Phillips curve, and here's the AD, aggregate demand, and here's the aggregate supply line. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example of an economy that is in a recessionary period. On this graph, that would mean that, well, since it's over here, it means we have to plot it to the right of the LRPC. So I'm going to plot it over here. And then over here, I'm going to plot it over, it's going to currently be here. Now for both of these graphs, we want to get them to equilibrium. That's our goal. So we want to somehow shift this dot over to the left to get to equilibrium. And for this, we just want to shift this intersection over to the LRAS line. Now, as I said before, cyclical unemployment only occurs during a recessionary period, which would apply to our example. Now that means that not enough money is being spent. So to increase spending, we need to increase AD. because when you increase, because AD is made up of consumption, business, exports, and government spending. So if any number of these things increase, then AD will increase. And these include spending and increasing the spending on any of these things would increase the AD, thus decreasing cyclical unemployment. So since we're going to say that one of these things was, we're going to say that AD was increased, so one of those things increased, so 82. Okay, so if that increases, then that means that since this was the original location on price level and real GDP output, that means that this is our new line, or new dot for our economy. Then that means that the real GDP output increase, and that means that our price level increases. So if you look down here, when price level increases, so does inflation. And so since we want to increase our inflation by going up the curve, that would work for us. And since real GDP output increases, then that changes it to unemployment decreasing, which works exactly how we wanted to, because we wanted this line to move to this one. And so by moving the AD graph, or the AD line that way, that means we would shift the dots to this line, or to this dot, meaning that we made our economy be set into equilibrium, which is exactly what we wanted. So now that that's a recessionary period, inversely we can do the inflationary. So for the inflation, what you would do would be to, this would be a lot faster, hold on. Real GDP output, price level, unemployment rates, inflation rate. Okay, so here's our LRPC, here's our LRA, oh wait, here's, darn it, I can fix it, hold on, LRAS. Okay, so our SRPC will be going this way, and our two lines will intersect over here, so this is AS, and this will be AD. Now, to get out of an inflationary period, we would want, if we want inflation to go down, because we're in an inflationary period and we want to get back to equilibrium, we want the inflation rates to go down. We're over here. That's where our economy stands. We want the inflation rate to go down so we can get back to equilibrium. So we want inflation to decrease. Oops. We want, which would mean that the price level will decrease. And if we do that, then the real GDP outputs will decrease, and the unemployment rate will increase, because it is inversely related to the real GDP output. Now, in that case, to make this happen, to make the price levels decrease and the real GDP output to decrease, we would take the AD and we would decrease AD because you would decrease AD because you want to decrease the demand for products being produced by decreasing any of the number of these 4 factors. So you want to decrease the amount of money being spent. So to do that, you would decrease the AD, and as you can see, when you decrease AD, this is where you were before, which is way up here and way up here. So when you decrease that, it decreases the RGDP outputs and it decreases the price level. Now when you decrease those two, you would decrease inflation and increase unemployment, which is what we wanted. So because to get from here to where we are to where we want to be, you want inflation rate to decrease so you can get from here to here, and you want the unemployment to increase from here to here so you can get to that full employment level and to reach equilibrium. So we've already discussed the relationship of the Phillips curve to the AD line, and how when AD increases to reach equilibrium, which would occur in a recessionary period, that means that the dots on the SRPC, which starts off as in a recessionary place, would shift to the left to reach equilibrium. And how when AD decreases to reach equilibrium, the dots on the Phillips curve moves to the right to reach the equilibrium point. Okay, so since we just talked about, since we reviewed how Phillips curve and AD interact in their relationship, and how when you increase AS, you increase the SRPC line. Now I'm going to talk to you about stagflation. Stagflation occurs when there is a supply shock. And a supply shock occurs when there is an increase in the cost of resources. So the increase in a resource cost would be like an increase in oil. So the supply shock means that the AS would have a leftward shift. That leftward shift means that the RGDP output would decrease, but the price levels would increase. And when you put that into the relationship between the Phillips curve and the ADAS graph, price level and RGDP, and over here you would have inflation and unemployment. Now, when price levels increase, that means that the inflation rate would increase, and when RGDP decreases, that means that because our GDP and unemployment rate are inversely related, when our GDP decreases, unemployment rate would decrease or increase. Now, this combination of having both inflation and unemployment increase is really bad. That's what the stagflation is. It's when there's a sudden increase in inflation and unemployment. When that occurs, if the point of where this economy is over here, that means the entire line would shift outward. And that's very bad for the economy, because it means even though that they're at natural rate, their inflation rate is high. And so that's pretty much it. Thank you for watching. Bye.